Stuck inside my mind in this quarantine house. The light at the end of the tunnel isn't in sight. Where do I go to find someone to talk to about all of my wants? You can never validate me, tell me the lies. I searched mental health and I'm anxious and depressed and my coping skills are not fine. We weren't a fit and it felt like a waste of time. I heard an interview and I felt an instant connection. I learned CBT, BBT and mindfulness skills and each and every session. I'm pulling through, ready to ask the next question. The next question. The next question. The next question. The next question.
Hello and welcome to NextQuest podcast, where I ask your potential therapist questions so you don't have to. I am your host, Noah S. Garcia, licensed professional counselor supervisor. Today I welcome to the show Barbara Nadalini Priesnitz, licensed professional counselor, who will be discussing her practice in one of her areas of specialty, past life regression. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Thanks, Noah. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So can you tell us what exactly is past life regression?
Yeah, that's a great question to start with. The concept of past life regression is that you can regress your subconscious memory to past lives. And of course, that implies that we have past lives, which implies that we have a soul or a spirit or some part of us that can incarnate or be embodied over and over again for some reason. And that soul or spirit or whatever you want to call that part of us actually has access to its full history of memories.
So reincarnation.
Yeah. It sounds weird at first, but now after all these years, now it sounds so normal and obvious to me, but I used to be really sensitive about saying it out loud. It was so weird.
So how can past life regression help people in a therapeutic sense, or what sorts of things can past life regression help with as a whole?
Okay, so without making any claims or medical claims, let me just say that past life regression was immensely helpful to me about 20 years ago, way before I was in this field. I was working in a whole other industry. And my brother asked me to go see this person that he had seen because he thought it was really cool. He was sort of the hippie, wild guy in the family. And I went skeptical. I was sort of in my intellectual, maybe atheist phase, but very open-minded and curious. And I went, and this woman in her 70s, Coletta Long, practiced. She had a PhD here in Austin in psychology. And I went to see her, and I had a life-changing experience. And it took me, honestly, 5 or 6 years to process it because it was so real and so intense that it forced me to confront what I believed and what I thought. And of course, there's no proof. So that's really hard to get your mind around. So all that to say, I had my own experience of how it could help. And maybe later I can talk more about how it helped me personally. But also my teacher, Dr. Brian Weiss, who wrote Many Lives, Many Masters and many other books, has written extensively about how this can help people, starting with relieving the fear of death. the fear of our own death, the fear of the death of our loved ones. That is a profound thing to happen if it can happen for you. So there's one. Another thing is for people who remember traumatic events from past lives. Just today, I had a regression client who remembered being impaled in the head on the left side of her head, where she has had migraines since she said she was 22. And she saw the scene in which she was impaled, and she was also in her early 20s as a male. She didn't say 22, but she said young and naive, and wearing sort of a chainmail, even a little drapey chainmail over his head, feeling like war would never come to his town. And he had this chainmail and it would protect him. And sure enough, war came to his town and he was easily killed, wounded through the chainmail. And Dr. Wise talks about spontaneous relief of phobias and sometimes physical symptoms related to past life traumas. It's well documented. The University of Virginia has a whole department around this, and you can find that online. You can find it on my website, but go to UVA and look up their paranormal psych and reincarnation department. They have that. So I'm sorry, what was the question again?
The question was how it can be helpful for people.
So it can be helpful by relieving the fear of death, by potentially relieving phobias or even physical symptoms. And finally, and I think most profoundly, it can be helpful by bringing home this idea that we are here to learn and grow, and all of our struggles and suffering and pain are on purpose for our learning and growth. Like if we really believe that, if we really consider that as a possible explanation for why this is so fucking hard, and it is hard for most everybody at some points and some people at all points, if it's something that maybe we signed up for, like a class we registered for, like something we know we needed, that our advisors said, you have to take this class next. It can change the way we approach ourselves and our own struggles and stumbles and even failings. It could change for therapists the way we view our clients and their struggles as noble and honorable and something to be slogged through and endured and overcome. And then you get the reward of, I passed it, I learned it, I know what that means, you know?
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it kind of goes hand in hand with like logotherapy and meaning making in some ways.
Yes, actually, yes. It's just more aligned with an idea around that each lifetime is for learning, but it is actually very similar to logotherapy and meaning making.
Cool. What if you don't believe in reincarnation or don't believe that we have souls? Would somebody still benefit from past life regression?
Okay, so I believe that yes, you can. And that's not just like, because I think you should come do it with me. Even if you think that this is a projection of your subconscious mind, whatever you remember is a projection of your subconscious mind, then that's valuable. That's therapeutically meaningful. In fact, I think it's pretty intense and profound. If your subconscious is projecting a whole storyline complete with minute details, and that it's all about what happened and what happened to you and how you responded and how you made sense of it and what would you do differently. That's what regression is all about. And if it's not real, if I'm wrong and this is it and we're just sort of an accident of chemistry and physics, then that's okay, because if this is a projection of my subconscious, it has been profoundly life-changing and relieving for me and for many, many others.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. Thank you.
How did you become interested in past life regression?
Well, honestly, my little brother. Doesn't everybody hate to say my little brother turned me on to this? My little brother, I have two younger brothers. One is 10 years younger, and he's the one. And he read Many Lives, Many Masters, and he brought me the book and said, it's not a long book. You need to read this. And I read it. It was very interesting. It's really the story of a very traditional, well-trained psychiatrist. I mean, Yale Medical School, New York Jewish psychiatrist, like textbook. And eventually he became, I think he was the chief of psychiatry at Cedars-Sinai, Miami. I mean, like big time, okay? And very secular, not spiritual, not religious. And he tells the story in this first book, Many Lives, Many Masters, which is, like I said, is a short book about a client he had who was either a nurse at the hospital or referred. She worked in the hospital. And she had some very specific and severe phobias. And he was convinced that her phobias were related to early childhood trauma. And he did age regression using hypnosis as part of his practice. And he regressed her to 3 or 4. And she did, in fact, remember some traumas somewhat related to her phobias. And he was convinced that her phobias would be completely relieved when she came out of this, but they weren't. So he thought, well, if something happened at 3 or 4 of this caliber, maybe something happened even when she was younger. So the next time he regressed her, he said, go back to the time that's the source of these symptoms. And she said something like, I'm standing on the bank of a river holding my baby and it's flooding. And my village is getting flooded. And he knew she didn't have any children. So this starts a whole process. You can read the book, but basically this client brings up this purported past life experience, even though she never expressed any interest or belief in anything like that. And the book is really a retelling of his experience of coming to terms. And then there's a lot of stuff that happens. You have to read the book that has to do with our guides, master spirits, master souls, actually speaking through her to him and his own skepticism and his own resistance and what happened. So it's a great book. But that question of how did I become interested? I read the book. My brother said, I went to see this woman. She's very legit. Go see her. I got on her schedule. This is like 20 years ago and it was expensive and it took a long time to get on her schedule. But I did it. And like I said, it was profoundly life-changing.
Did you have any mixed feelings about pursuing past life regression, given that it's outside our cultural norms?
Cultural norms, yes. I did. I was raised Catholic. I abandoned Catholicism around age 17 and didn't pick up anything in its place. I mean, I just abandoned the whole, as I call it, the one syllable problem, God. I abandoned the whole concept around 17. And, when I had that experience, I told you I struggled for 5 or 6 years. Part of that struggle was, if I believe this, does that mean that other people are going to know I believe this? Am I going to be embarrassed that I think and I say I believe this? It's really, I was young, but I was embarrassed. I thought it was intellectually uncool. I thought it was impossible. I thought a lot of things. So as time went on, the truth is I had a very successful career in technology and I made a lot more money than I do as a therapist. But I was always drawn to this idea of doing past life regression as a therapist. That was really what made me go back to school to be a therapist. But did I tell anybody that? No, it was my personal secret little secret. And I went through graduate school while working full time, and I, did the exam, and I did my 3,000 hours, and I did go pursue clinical hypnosis training after I finished my master's at the Erickson Institute in Phoenix, Arizona. I had this idea that I wanted to be as legitimate as possible. So I wanted a master's degree. I wanted the post-grad training in clinical hypnosis. I was already too old at 40 something. I thought I was too old to pursue a PhD, and the years and the time and the money. I was already a single parent. So I wanted to be as legitimate as I could be. And of course, during those first years of doing my internship and then beginning a private practice, I never mentioned regression to anyone because I was afraid it would delegitimize me. And then I practiced for the first couple of years in private practice, which of course was a slow process of building. And then I decided, I've got to do this. This is why I did this. This is what I want to do. And I started a separate website, a separate business for regression, because of course, regression is not a recognized therapeutic modality, right? So I couldn't keep it inside my regular therapy practice. And yes, I was really embarrassed. It took me a long time to be willing to talk about it. But let me just say, once I started mentioning it to other therapists, to other people, I would say 99 out of 100 people said, oh, really, that's really interesting. One person said in the first couple of years, oh my God, that's crazy. And even when she said it, I kind of looked at her like, that didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. And now it doesn't. Now I bring it up on purpose because I know that it's going to be a provocative, in a good way, opening conversation, opening ideas about what we believe and why we believe what we believe, and etc.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So how does one get trained in past life regression? What are your credentials?
Well, technically, you don't have to be a therapist of any kind. So there are a lot of lay practitioners, and I'm not going to knock them. I think there's a lot of really gifted, devoted people who do that, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I approached it from, I want to at least be a licensed counselor, and then I want to get legitimate clinical hypnosis training. And then 2 years later, I went to the Omega Institute in New York for a week-long regression therapist training with Dr. Weiss in 2015. And honestly, I tried to go in 2014, and there was a waiting list. It took me a couple of times at that time, at least, he offered it 3 times a year. I don't know what it is now. He's in his 70s. So I went there for the therapist training. The therapist training did not exclude people on the basis of their credentials. So anybody could come, but there were only 100 or so people, which is really small if you think about it, in a week-long group training. And there were a number of dentists and nurses, and there were some psychiatrists, and there were some lactation consultants, and there were a lot of different types of practitioners, a number of therapists, and then of course some lay people, some who were practicing as a business and some who were just interested. And that was a really great experience, including I got randomly selected to be regressed by Dr. Weiss on a stage in front of this group. And that was also a pretty intense experience.
Sounds very legit to me, Barbara.
Thank you. I'm not ashamed about it anymore. I'm surprised that I ever was, but I understand how I was.
So being a therapist is not your first career. Something in technology was. What was this something in technology that you did?
Oh, I started out as a business analyst which for people who know anything about the sort of technology industry, it's, entry level, sometimes entry level. I got to be pretty advanced in it, but it's really where you talk to people about what they need their software to do, and then you translate it for the developers. And from there, I grew and evolved in that field into the business side of software architecture and program management, and I loved it. But it wasn't, I always felt a calling to come back to this. And eventually I did.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to add, I was divorced. I really got into my own therapy as a client seriously when I was about 35, 36. I mean, I had a marriage falling apart. I was going to therapy twice a week for the first few months and weekly for a couple of years. That's a long time to do weekly therapy for me. And my therapist was in her 70s. And when I left, the next person was waiting to go in. And I knew divorcing in my late 30s, I was going to have to cash in my 401k just to buy a house. I didn't have an ex-husband who was going to be providing anything. So I was looking at her thinking, this is what I want to be doing. And you can work into your 70s. And I needed that. I knew I was going to have to keep working until my 70s. And in IT, once you hit 45 to 55, developers start saying, my grandmother has that sweater and you're aged out, or you have to go into management or sales, which I didn't really want to do.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you've already told us a lot about yourself, but tell us, like what TV do you watch? What do you enjoy doing? That whole thing.
I love science fiction. So I read a lot of science fiction, and I watch the science fiction that I like. I feel pretty particular about it. I also read historical fiction. I read a lot. I went through a phase for many years where I only read nonfiction, sort of as a badge of honor. And I learned a lot. And then I remarried, and my husband got sick. And while he was in the hospital several times, I couldn't focus on the nonfiction. And so I bowed my head and downloaded some fiction. And that started a many years grateful relationship with fiction and escape. And really, reading to me is more rewarding than watching. I usually read by listening to audiobooks, and I can do it while I'm doing the dishes, or while I'm gardening, or while I'm walking around for exercise, or it's a lifesaver. What else about me? I'm the oldest child of 5. We're 10 years apart, oldest to youngest. I grew up partly in Dallas and partly in Italy, in Milan. I have one daughter and 3 stepchildren that are like my children. And I'm now widowed. And all of those things have affected me profoundly, of course. And I'm grateful for them all.
Thanks for that, Barbara.
Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned that you have a regression website separate from your therapy practice.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that regression is a part of your therapy practice, or would you say they function completely independently?
Legally and technically, they function independently. And that is because I don't want any of my therapy clients who file for insurance reimbursement to run up against pushback from their insurance company saying this is a person who practices outside of the acceptable arena. However, that said, some of my favorite clients started as regression clients. And I don't mean to say that people have to start as regression clients to fall into that category. It's just that it's so nice to start out with a baseline of knowing someone and having someone be really so vulnerable and so willing to dig deeply and to be outside of the realm of the sure known, because that sets a great tone for therapy, right? When you don't know and when you're willing to just go with what comes up and see. I mean, it really has been a great way to start therapy. But most of my regression clients are not therapy clients, and most of my therapy clients are not regression clients.
Okay, so you don't necessarily have to be one to be the other.
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, I'm careful not to mention regression to my regular therapy clients unless it seems relevant and part of the conversation. I don't want people to feel influenced or off-put by my personal. I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about my spirituality. I don't talk about any of that unless I think it's relevant.
What are your fees for, let's say, you do regular therapy as well. So what are your fees for past life regression and regular therapy? And do you take insurance? And I'm sure there's not a CPT code for past life regression.
There's not. There's really not yet. And let me just say that I've become a little bolder in the fact that certain types of religious therapy are recognized and accepted, like Christian therapy. There's some other types of religious therapy that are recognized, and I don't think that, frankly, that's any different than regression therapy. However, to your question, I charge $150 an hour for therapy for one person. I charge $175 an hour for 2 or more people. And for regression, it's $350 for 2 hours. And there's a $75 consult required that is done preferably days or weeks before the regression. And that's 30 minutes. And that is very important. And I don't know if this is when you want me to talk about the consult, but
yeah, let's tell us about the consult.
The consult. So I used to do an optional consult. Some people really wanted to meet me first and talk about it. And some people just wanted to book the regression. And what I found was that the people who had done a consult had a drastically much higher, I want to call it a success rate, but that's such a loaded term. They had the least amount of problems relaxing to the level that they needed to, achieving the hypnotic state that they needed to get through the regression without issue. The people who did not have the consult tended to struggle more. So after a few years, I decided to require the consult. And like I said, I prefer to do it days or preferably weeks in advance. Part of that is in order to relax enough to go into a deep enough trance to access your own soul's memories, you have to be really, really out of 2020 or whenever it is. And to do that, you have to relax very, very deeply, more deeply than most people have ever relaxed. And to do that, you have to feel safe. I mean, that's the bottom line. And to feel safe with me in particular. So my voice, my presence, my energy, my approach. And I found that the people who did the consult connected with me, felt comfortable, felt safe, and that's what made the difference. And since I've started requiring it, I mean, it's been radically improved my practice.
Cool.
Because, of course, it's easier for me if the person easily goes into the process too. Otherwise, I can get them there, but it takes a lot more work, which I don't mind doing, but if I can eliminate it by helping them feel safer with me 2 weeks earlier, great for both of us.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So going back to reincarnation, how would you describe it?
Okay. So I'm not a spiritual guru, but my understanding of reincarnation, to the best of my knowledge, is that there is one source, and from that source, we are unique souls that come. And I believe personally that we are all basically little gods in training, and that we have to come experience all of these things to grow, to mature, to ripen, to rise. And that it's like college, or you sign up for, you have to take all the classes, you have to learn all the stuff, and you have to go in order. You take algebra, and then you take trigonometry, and then you take calculus, and then you take something called vector calculus. It actually gets harder as you go. And most of the teachers all agree on that, that as you grow spiritually, actually life is hard. It's not like a spiritually mature person has some easy, charmed life, just the opposite. So I believe reincarnation is about going to school.
And so we reincarnate to learn new things.
That's what I believe.
Tell us about the in-between place.
In between lives. This is something that is implied by the concept of reincarnation, but not as well described, and certainly without as much consensus on what it's like. When we incarnate, we have these lives as humans, whether it's medieval times or prehistoric times or 200 years ago or now. The human experience is pretty consistent, frankly. And I've worked with people from all kinds of cultures and all sorts of class and education and language and ages. And their experiences in regression are very consistent. But the experiences of what it's like when you're not embodied are less consistent. And I don't mean less consistent like conflicting or problematic. Just imagine that you're in a human brain and you're trying to explain something that is difficult to explain. You're going to explain it in terms and images or concepts that you can process. So a lot of people, I would say most people, describe the in-between as being in space, seeing stars, vast, limitless space. Some people describe it very specifically as a place with crystalline structures or made out of light. Some people describe it as just being in light. Some people describe it as the absence of things that they can describe, but that they're in total peace, like resting. Some people describe it as being with all of the other souls. So I don't know if I believe, my experience in listening to all of my clients over the years talk about that in-between space, in between lifetimes. I've heard enough to hear the consistencies, and I've heard enough to hear the ways in which people strive to describe something that's indescribable. But ultimately, the idea is that in between these lifetimes, we are processing what happened in that lifetime. We're reviewing it with our guides, with our teachers, our advisors. My experience, the first time I did regression, both times of being in between, it felt like a dark, but not like dark, ominous, human dark, more like just without any light or dimension. This being, I was in this space that had nothing around it, and there was some energy, some spirit asking me questions. How do you think that one went? What did you learn? What were you there to learn? And both times, the first regression I ever did, I remembered 2 lifetimes. And after the first one, I said, I wasted so many years being bitter and lonely and angry. And then the second one, I had committed suicide. And at the end of that one, I said, I wasted another one. And I had this profound feeling of, gosh, I wasted it. I just threw it away. And that has stayed with me. I mean, it's been almost 20 years and I'm determined not to waste it. I think even the suckiest parts of this thing are an amazing opportunity for growth.
Some deep shit, Barbara.
That's some deep shit for real. Seriously.
It is.
I know. I agree. It's amazing.
So, what is the origin of souls according to this thought?
I don't know. I don't actually know. I don't personally adhere to any dogma or school of thought. Dr. Weiss doesn't try to say how it all works or why. I've read a lot of amazing books, and some of them get real specific in the explanations, and some of them just completely do what I'm doing, which is to say, we don't know, but this is what we are. I think that we are all parts of the same thing, whatever that is, that we are. So the best way I can describe it, which I said earlier, I think we're all like little gods in training. You know, when I was growing up, they all said we are all children of God. They also said there were chosen children and unchosen children, which even at like 8 or 10, I rejected mentally. But if we're all children of God, then we are the same thing. We are that. And I think this is how we grow. And frankly, one of the hardest things that anybody deals with in regression, and one of the hardest concepts to talk about, is why people do bad shit, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to children? Why are there perpetrators? Why are there Donald Trumps? You know, why do these things happen? And my best understanding is that somebody's got to play the bad guy in the play, right? We're staging a play. The play is for the benefit of the audience. The audience is going to see themselves and learn something in watching this whole thing play out. The drama is exaggerated on purpose to make its point. And when you stage a play, somebody's got to play the bad guy. And by the way, there's a lot to be learned from what it's like to be the bad guy. The truth is, I think, in my opinion, most of us have perpetrated in some ways in our lives, and we've certainly all been victimized in certain ways in our lives. And we've been the silent observers. We've been moments where we've stepped up and intervened. We've played all these roles in each lifetime. But then some people seem to play out a role for a whole lifetime or across lifetimes. I don't know why that is, but I know that ultimately I know. And when I say I know, I call it capital K knowing. I know, which is more than believe, that we are all the same thing. We are all from the same place. We're all here to learn and grow. We're all going to the same place. And those perpetrators have been us, and those victims have been us. And I can go off the deep end there. Sorry.
You're good. What happens when a soul has achieved all that it was intended to do?
I don't know. A lot of people come and say, I know this is going to be my last lifetime. And you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe they know. Maybe it is. I don't feel that way. I do feel like Earth is kind of a K through 12. So I don't personally feel like this is like a graduate school. This is a place with second graders. And you know what? Second graders don't bother me anymore because, of course, that's what, and it's not being demeaning or condescending. Like, we're all in school. That second grader is going to grow up to be a leader. That second grader is going to quit spitting spitballs and bullying people and become a like full human experiencer at some point. You know, it's like the love that teachers have for students. This is something else I kind of struggle with, is the idea that we're all not exactly in the same place, right? Because I do care about, frankly, not political correctness for the sake of political correctness, but for all the reasons that we struggle to stay mindful of those ideas and challenges. And so the idea that we're not all at the same place at some point is presumptuous and condescending. But at the same time, we look around. Like, there are people who are really struggling with some really basic ideas about how to tell the truth, how to forgive, how to get up the next day and keep going. I mean, I'm not speaking very eloquently on this, but all of the shit that's going on is how it's always gone on. And yes, we're hurting our planet. I don't think for a second that our planet is going to let us keep hurting it for very much longer. But I do think that humans are humans, and this is what we do. I got off track again. What did you ask me?
I asked, what happens when the soul has achieved all that it was intended to do?
Well, I mean, everything I've read and every teacher I've had says that you go on to the next school, right? To the higher, like you go to college, you go to grad school or whatever it is. Some people stay here to teach. Some people stay here to help. Maybe you can do both. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But it's messy here. This place, I mean, I could cry, right? This place is messy and chaotic, and it has as much tragedy as it has joy on any day. And so I don't think coming here is a breeze, but I don't really have anything in mind that I can compare it to.
So, what can one expect to experience during a past life regression session?
Okay, that's easy to answer. You've already had a consult with me, so we've already talked about what to do to prepare, how to prepare your body, your mind. The mind is a big thing because the mind can really interfere. The mind sometimes does not like things that don't make sense. But we've already done all that, and you get here. I usually do regressions in person, even now, although I can do them certainly online. And we spend 5 or 10 minutes talking and connecting, and then the person gets comfortable. Most people lie down, not everybody lies down. They arrange pillows or a blanket. I have a little microphone they clip on their clothes. I have eye masks, and we get started. There's a 25-minute progressive relaxation hypnotic induction. That is more than twice as long as a standard clinical hypnosis induction in my practice. So the first 25 minutes are the induction, meaning inducing a hypnotic state that's deep enough to go into the regression. The regression itself, there's 2 different times during the induction when I prompt people to take all the time they need to make their request or intention through their heart, their soul, their guides, for what they want, what they need out of this regression experience. And then once they go through I call it a gateway. It's really a conceptual device to move out of the concept of this life into memories of another life. And people have more or less of a hard time making that initial transition. Most people feel like they're there. They feel like they're somewhere. Most people can see their feet. They can see the ground they're standing on. Some people can immediately go into describing what's happening, where they are. And some people really need, I would say, 5 or 10 minutes worth of help to become more grounded in where they are. I'm very careful not to ask leading questions. I ask over and over again, what do you notice? What are you aware of? What do you feel is happening? I ask them to, crouch down and touch the ground with their hands and tell me what they feel. Touch your feet. Are you wearing shoes or not? So then most everybody gets there, even if it takes 5 or 10 extra minutes. And then we go through each lifetime. Most people get through 2 or 3 in the session. Some people only get through 1, some people get through 5 or more, and none of that is determined by me or even by the client. If I say, when we're going through the lifetime, if I say, let's go to the next most significant event in that lifetime, and then you're there, and I say, how much time seems to have gone by? And you say 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. We're going to jump through the life like that. And depending on how long those periods of time are between significant events, it could take up the whole session to get through one. Or you could jump and say, now I was 20 and now I'm 80. That happened today. Lady said, oh, I'm an old woman and I'm hunched over and my body hurts. And this is not, it was interesting, but I hear that a lot. So it depends how long. Everybody, I would say without fail, everybody gets to a death. And I think it's one of the most important takeaways is to remember dying. Remember what it feels like to die. And that is regardless of whether it's a peaceful death, an expected death, a violent death, an unexpected death, young, old, doesn't matter. What is it like to die, for your soul to leave your body? Because when people remember what that's like, everybody, no one has ever described a sort of deviant experience. And I don't mean deviant, I mean a diverse experience. Everybody experiences the same thing or describes the same thing to me, which I'm not going to describe to you because I don't want to load anybody. But let's just say there's 100% consistency, and it's inherently relieving. And so if people come away saying, wow, I remember dying and it felt like ultimately relieving, then their fears of dying, their fears of their loved ones dying are profoundly changed. And I can say that my husband died this year. He had been sick for a long time. And as we anticipated his death and it got closer and closer, I really wondered if my own spiritual knowing would be enough to support my grief, to help me. And I have to say, I was just curious, and I've been surprised to find that I haven't doubted it for a moment. My experience is remembering dying multiple times, and listening to countless other people's experiences of dying. completely changed how I processed his death. I mean, I miss him, but I don't wonder if he still exists. I don't think twice about talking to him, reaching out, etc. That's what to expect during regression. You may encounter people that I might say, do you recognize that soul from anyone in your current life? People recognize some people. Some people, they'll say, nope, I've never met that person in this life. It's very emotional. Most people cry. And I encourage people to lean into those emotions, open to those emotions. It tends to help actually the regression become more clear and more rich. Yeah.
What is a hypnotic trance and how is that achieved?
Hypnotic trance is a focused state of awareness. It's measurable. It's a change in your brainwave frequency. So it's not woo-woo at all. A hypnotic trance is really a shift out of beta into alpha or even theta. Certainly for regression, we're in theta. There are 4 primary brainwave patterns, you, me, and all the mammals. Beta, alpha, theta, delta. Delta is deep sleep. Beta is talking, working, thinking, processing like adults. Alpha is light relaxation. So whenever you're working and you look out the window and you just take a breath, like 2 or 3 seconds, and you see the green trees or blue sky or whatever, you stop thinking words for a minute and your brain drops out of beta into alpha. And that happens constantly throughout the day. When we get into theta, it's part of our dream state. It's just falling asleep. It's just waking up. It is when we are lost in deep daydreaming thought. So some people, it's standing in the shower. They really have spontaneous, creative revelations and ideas. For me, it's red lights. I always have my best, spontaneous growth concepts come at red lights. When you're driving home and suddenly you're at home and you don't remember getting off the highway, that's a theta level trance. So this is not when people say, oh, I don't think I can be hypnotized. It's sort of like saying, oh, I don't think I can relax. Everybody relaxes all the time. The question is, can you do it in a stranger's office? That's the only question. Can you do it when you're at home? Yes. Can you do it listening to an audio tape when you're at home? Maybe not if you're nervous about what's going to happen. So it's really about how comfortable you are with relaxing. And again, that's part of why the consult, to feel safe, to explain. When people remember traumatic experiences, no one has ever been re-traumatized. And actually, paradoxically, remembering traumatic experiences is often relieving of the symptoms of similar or related traumas in this life. Or even just the idea that our traumas have to be this, primary scarring experience. I have a lot of trauma history. I mean, that's how we become therapists, right? I have my own trauma history, and the regression work that I've done over the years doesn't remove anything that happened to me or how I processed it, but it's given me a much broader perspective on the drama, the play of human trauma, and what we're learning and how we can keep going.
So have you ever had anybody just be incapable of being put under hypnosis?
I've only had one person, and it wasn't for regression, it was for smoking cessation. And he seemed very calm and relaxed. And I went through the whole thing. And at the end I said, so how do you feel? And he said, just like I did when we started. And I said, really? Tell me about that. What do you mean? He said, well, my wife made this appointment for me and I told her it wasn't going to work. And it's like, okay, well, I'm really sorry that didn't help you, but that's the only person that was not able to get there. A lot of people struggle for, I would say, the first 5 to 7 minutes. And that's based on me asking them later, at what point did you really let go? At what point did your brain stop thinking about what I was saying and if the air conditioning was on or whatever? So I just have a lot of data that suggests that everybody gets there by after minute 7. And then when I get from minute 7 to minute 25, you can imagine it's profound. But I also make a point to tell people, like, you will be in complete integrity in your body the whole time. If you need to scratch your nose or shift your weight, I've had people get up to go pee in the middle of this, and they're fine. They maintain the state because it's intentional. It's your intention. I don't make people hypnotized. I facilitate people relaxing into a different brainwave frequency where they can do this work. And if you get there through your own intention and you need to get up and go pee, then it will be within your intention to come back and be immediately rejoined to that state. They say all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, and I 100% believe that. You just have to be comfortable letting yourself go there with my help.
So fascinating.
Yeah, it's awesome. I feel really lucky to do this work. I love it.
Is progression or knowing of future lives possible?
Yes.
Do you have experience with it?
Yes. So Dr. Weiss, again, like totally normal, Yale Medical School, New York, kind of. He's great because when he talks about these things that are so out there, it's like, I know it doesn't really seem to make sense, but if you look at quantum physics, time is not linear. And everything that the physicists tell us is that we can't understand, actually, we can't comprehend in our brains how time works. But his experience, and now my experience, has been people do remember what we consider future lives. He calls it progression. There's a book, Same Soul, Many Bodies, that's about progression. I'm sure there's a lot of other books too. And yes, I have remembered personally future lifetimes. Some of those in workshops with Dr. Weiss and some of those outside of that. Not that many people have spontaneous progressions in my office. In other words, they're not expecting a progression, or they don't know of the concept of a progression, and they remember something that upon discussion after the session does not appear to be something that's happened in the present or the human past that we know of. In fact, it sounds decidedly futuristic, and not like movie futuristic, more like plain humdrum life like we know it, except with, metal spheres that you can pilot and see through, or like all sorts of interesting things that you just can't make this shit up, as I like to say. It's fascinating. So yes, you can remember future things. Dr. Weiss, in a workshop I did probably 15 years ago out at the Crossings when that was still there. Now it's a spa on Lake Travis. He asked everybody we did a series of progressions. Again, there were about 100 people in the room. Now he has 500 people in the room, but back then it was much smaller. And he had everybody go to 150 years in the future, and then 500 years in the future, and then 1,000 years in the future. And I personally had an image, a set of images at 150 years. I had nothing at 500 years, and I had something at 1,000 years. At 150 years, I was a male college student in Boulder, Colorado. random, like studying something environmental, and life was very similar to the way it is now. 500 years in the future, I got nothing. 1,000 years in the future, I was a little old man with a hoe in my dirt garden outside of a house, like in remote something, and people would come see me. And I didn't remember a whole lot. But at the end of that, he asked everybody a show of hands who all remembered something at 150 years. And many of us raised our hands. Who all remembered something at 500 years? 2 people out of 100, 3 people raised their hands. How many people remembered something at 1,000 years? Half the room raised their hands. And he said, I've been doing this for a number of years all over the world, and something appears to happen to drastically reduce the planet's population 300 to 600 years from now. But then it comes back slowly. But that has always stayed with me. It was so simple and real, and he wasn't promoting anything. He was just asking, and I saw the people raise their hands and not raise their hands. And I know my own experience at the 500-year mark. I just got nothing. And if my brain is just projecting out of my subconscious and creatively imagining things, surely I would make something up for every period, and so would everybody else. Anyway, so that was fascinating.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Progression, yeah.
How long is a past life regression session?
It's about 2 hours start to finish, but the first 25 minutes, the first 5 or 10 minutes are getting comfortable, talking, preparing. Then there's 25-minute induction. And then there's about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 to an hour and 15 minutes of exploring a past life or past lives. Depending on where you are in a past life or when it's ending, I'll either ask if you want to explore more, or we'll come out and we'll have time to talk at the end. Either way, there's 10, 15 minutes to talk at the end. Some people spend a lot of time on that in between. And when they're there, they have access to their guides or guide. And sometimes those conversations are very clear and structured, and they vocalize them to me even. And sometimes people go silent for a long time. It's a long time. I try not to let anybody stay silent for more than 2 or 3 minutes, which if you're in silence, that's a long time. Generally after 1 minute, I'll ask people, do you need any help? Where are you? What's happening? But when you're in the in-between and they say they're going to engage with their guide, I tend to really give a little more room. But that can actually be a primary aspect. I mean, there's a whole practice around life between lives, Dr. Thomas Newton's books, which I love his books too. And I think that those books are fascinating and revealing, but I also think that there are some issues with how he put those books together or structured the books. Or anyway, there certainly is a lot of richness to be experienced in between lifetimes.
Are there any situations in which past life regression would be contraindicated?
Well, technically, yes. It is a dissociative process. So when you're in hypnosis training, they say, do not practice hypnosis with people who are already dissociated. It's sort of a standard logical thing. However, I have had some requests to practice regression with 2 different people with psychosis disorders who were not minors, but their parents came with them and said they really wanted them to attempt a regression. And in both of those cases, it was culturally more normalized to explore the concept of reincarnation and what past lives can how they can affect you in this life. And so in both cases, I've sat with the client and the parent together and talked to them about the standard approaches, the idea of dissociation, and what could happen if the dissociation felt more extreme for that person. And it's hard to ask someone who's experiencing psychosis if they consent. And it's hard to just let an adult's parent tell you that they consent. So it was definitely in both cases not just a no-brainer, but ultimately they both seemed to want to do it in both cases, and I did it. And let me tell you, one of them really could do it just like everybody else, and one of them couldn't. But it didn't cause any additional distress. It was just, she kept talking about her usual intrusions and wasn't able to relax enough. But the other one was, and that was interesting. She seemed to get a lot out of it. So it's not something I would ever promote for that population. But on a case-by-case basis, I certainly haven't found it to be harmful.
Okay. Is there any follow-up to regressions?
Not required. I certainly invite people to come if they want to process any part of it, especially if they find any part of their regression unsettling, difficult to understand or to make meaning from, to interpret, to integrate into their lives. Some people are already in therapy. A lot of people are already in therapy with someone else. In fact, a lot of people's therapists recommend them to come do regression, which I've found fascinating and kind of grateful. So some people, I'm sure, go to their own therapists and process it. And some people become regular clients. Some people come for one session to sort of process the things that they have questions about. I tell people it takes a few weeks for what I call the dust to settle. That's a lot. It's a lot of information. And then there's a recording. And if you listen to the recording, there may or may not be parts that you didn't even remember. Most people remember most of it. But I know for me, I didn't want to do it again for years. It was just too intense. It was exhausting. It was emotionally exhausting. I've done it multiple times since then, but I've never done it more than once every couple of years.
What is the client-therapist dynamic like in past life regression?
That's a good question. It's really different than in therapy. So in therapy, I'm providing input, right? I'm responding and reacting to the client when appropriate in ways that are intended to provoke or prompt a further reaction or response from the client, right? There's a dynamic that's focused on growth, and I'm really participating. In regression, I'm not. I'm a facilitator. I'm not giving my thoughts, my input, my take on things. I'm not interpreting things as we go. I am really just the Sherpa. Okay. And at the end, if they want to talk about, if we have time or they come back and want to talk about it and they ask me, what do you think about this or that? I'm happy to share my take on it. But it's not at all like the dynamic of the standard therapeutic relationship in my practice anyway.
Okay.
I'm a pretty engaged therapist, and I'm not in regression.
Yeah. What are some common misconceptions about past life regression?
I don't know. It's so weird now that I'm so inside it. I can't remember whatever I thought that wasn't real, just that it was so weird. I don't think it's weird at all. In fact, it's so affirming of the human experience. Misconceptions. I don't know. Do you know of any?
I can't think of anything.
A lot of times people ask me if they're going to remember lifetimes as earthworms or horses, that has not been my experience. Not personally, not in my training, and not with all of my clients. Nobody has ever remembered a lifetime as people have remembered some lifetimes on some other planets, but they were sort of human-like. Nobody's ever remembered a lifetime in my practice as a non-human-like or human entity. People have remembered reincarnations of various pets very clearly, like very confidently, but not the other way around.
Okay. Turning to you and your practice a little more, what kind of experience do you have working with particularly vulnerable clients, such as those who are transgender, undocumented, or BIPOC?
So, vulnerable, what was the word you used again? Vulnerable
Clients or populations.
Populations, that's what I was looking for. Vulnerable populations. So I have had people from all walks of life, including people who are transgender, people who are biracial, or people of color, or every kind of people. Old people, young people, people who don't speak English. That's another thing we should talk about in a second. People who, all people who have very different spiritual beliefs, Muslim people, all sorts of people. But the most vulnerable people to come and do this, it's a fairly empowered decision to come and do this in the first place. So let me just say that the vulnerable populations that I have worked with are inherently coming to this experience as an expression of agency and empowerment just to begin with, just that they know about this and they're going to do this and they're going to do it. From my perspective, we're all souls and we're all having these various different lives and different circumstances in life on purpose, and in my opinion, of our own choosing. So I don't see someone from a vulnerable population as inherently different from me on a spiritual level. Certainly our life experiences and the circumstances we are in, and I believe chose, but that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. But I can't say that I can relate to them in their life experience in this life, but they're here to do regression. They're here in the premise that we have multiple lives and that we have lots of different kinds of lives. I believe that we've all led very vulnerable lives, and we've all led lives of oppression and power, and that it's an important experience to be on all sides of that. And so I guess I could just say there's nothing particularly unique about someone coming from a vulnerable population to this practice. If anything, it can be further empowering, and I certainly don't see them as being vulnerable in my office.
So what about people who don't speak English?
So, if you think about the concept spiritually, there is no language. I mean, human language is like the way we all look a little different, or the different cultures and different ways of dressing. It's very superficial, and that deep down, we've all lived in multiple cultures and multiple languages and all of these different ways, and that there is a part of us that is at a higher level of abstraction from these differences that we think of in terms of language, including language. So when people remember a lifetime, in the jungle in South America, they're talking to me in English, right? But their experience there, I'll say sometimes, what is your name? I can't pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce it now. Or so there's a lot of that, but then there's also people who come to me and barely speak English and say, is this going to be a problem? And my experience all along has been, nope. Your soul is not an English speaker or a Farsi speaker or a French speaker or whatever. Our souls are multilingual and easily translating. So when I was doing my training in Arizona at the Erickson Institute, one of the teachers was Brazilian. And, that training in clinical hypnosis is about, when I was there, it was maybe 35, 36 people, half of which were not from the United States. So it was a large percentage were international from all over, every continent except maybe Antarctica. And they did a demonstration. She did a demonstration in Portuguese. She specifically selected a participant who was from Poland who spoke English, but he didn't speak any Romance languages. And so she had him come up and volunteer. He was a psychologist, I think, in Poland. And he sat in the front and we were all watching. And she did the whole induction in Portuguese. And we all watched him go completely under. And it was the tone of her voice. And I mean, even when someone's eyes are closed, she's using her hands. It's this full body energy, which I try to practice myself. So this idea that hypnosis reaches a part of us that is beyond language, that is beyond whatever our various and multiple diversities are, that is beyond our beliefs and our intellectual training or whatever that is, that our spiritual selves are always operating at a higher level, that, much higher than me, Barbara, can process. Like I have to rely on my higher self to make sense of it, because sometimes I witness things and I hear things and I'm just amazed, but some other part of me seems to be flowing with it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thanks.
How would you say your clients describe or experience you?
That's always hard, isn't it? If somebody asked you that, would you have an easy time answering?
No.
No. I mean, I think they would say that I'm nice. I don't know. I have no idea. That I'm spiritual. That I'm not pushy about beliefs. I don't have any agenda for anybody's beliefs at all. I don't know what people would say. I mean, I think they would say nice things,
Okay.
Generally.
Are you the type of therapist who will laugh or cry with your clients?
Absolutely.
How do you hold space for someone during regression?
That I do each time. It requires a lot of conscious attention. For me, people are wearing an eye mask. So I love to look in my clients' eyes when I'm doing therapy. Some people don't really like that, and so I can't. But for a lot of people are comfortable with that. But in regression with the eye mask, and the eye mask makes a big difference. It really helps to block the light and I look at their mouth and their nostrils. Like I'm usually sitting where I can see their mouth and then the nose, the part that's not covered by the mask. And I've been doing this so long now, I just tend to like look at that part of their face and then I zone out. And now I'm so zoned out. What did you ask me again?
How you hold space for someone during regression.
I hold space. So I'm looking at them and I get into this zoned out place. And then I'm really just trying to imagine what they're seeing. I'm listening to them talking. I'm trying to stay in it with them. Of course, I can't see what they're seeing. But in my own way, I am trying to, if they say, oh, I'm standing in a meadow, I picture a meadow. If they say, I'm feeling apprehensive, I try to imagine feeling apprehensive. Like I try to track them throughout whatever they're saying. And sometimes they don't say things that I see on that. So I can see that they're emotional and they're not saying it. So whatever it is, that is part of how I do that in regression, which is different than regular therapy. That I stay with them. In fact, it's why I charge more. I'm exhausted. I can't just do one and then do another one. Like it's really, it takes much more intentional presence and energy from me than being in a therapy session, frankly. And I'm a very intense present therapist, or at least I try to be. And the regression is a whole other level.
That makes sense. What's the best advice you've ever received from a supervisor?
Wow. I told my supervisor when I was an intern after my master's degree that I sort of revealed to her that I was interested in past life regression. And she on the one hand, absolutely poo-pooed it and was a total secular atheist and comfortable and really easygoing about it. And at the same time said, you need to do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter what I think or what anybody else thinks. Like you need to just say what's true for you and see how it feels when you do that. And in some ways, maybe it has meant more to me over the years, knowing that she thought that was all bullshit. And she still said, you've got to go do and say whatever it is you're feeling. So that has stuck with me. Better than if she had been like a true believer and like, yeah, go do this. It'll be great,
Yeah. How would you define happiness?
Scoff. It's such a loaded word.
I know.
I would define happiness as fleeting moments in a person's life that everybody has experienced and will experience more of, and not a goal for all the damn time. Is that too negative?
No, I
live in a space of like grateful contentedness. But the idea of happiness, I think, is so, like, I love happy moments. I have happy moments. They're moments.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of moments, what is the most embarrassing moment you've had as a clinician?
Okay, this is really embarrassing, but honestly, it's been forgetting I had sessions and getting called. Like in my first 2 years working in a clinic, I still kind of cringe when I think back on it. I would get a call. Oh, Barbara, there's so-and-so's here and says she has a session with you right now. And I just had such a hard time adjusting to working on a fixed schedule because in my career before, it was very hurry up and wait and do things when you could. And it took me a couple of years, and am ashamed to say it was at least 3, 4, or 5 times that it happened. And I felt really embarrassed and really bad every time. And, it didn't take more than 5 times, maybe 4, before I just resolved. I had to get off my digital phone-based calendar, which, people change, as you probably know, people change things all the time. And I can't easily change things on my phone. So I went to a paper and pencil system, and now I have years of these books of paper and pencil, and I don't miss appointments. But yeah, that was probably my most embarrassing. I'm sure there are other things, but that's the one that came to mind.
You mentioned earlier that you've been in therapy in the past. Are you in therapy currently?
No, not right now. My therapist moved out of the 48 contiguous states.
Oh, wow.
And I've had a couple of sessions when he's been back in town. And if I need him, I can call and set one up on Zoom. But as I mentioned earlier, my husband died. He was sick for a long time. And so in the last few years, I didn't, besides working and taking care of the rest of my family, I didn't set any new goals for personal growth. It was all about getting through one foot after the other. And I got through that. And I did rely on his help some. And I stayed in a supervision group for a few years after I was fully licensed, and even through the beginning of my husband's illness. And that was therapeutic too. Mm-hmm. But I tend to do therapy in chunks. The first time was a few years, and then I had a few years break, and then I did another couple of years. I know there are people who go, every Monday for 25 years, but that's not me.
Well, is there anything else you think would be good for a potential client or other therapists to know about you and or past life regression?
Well, I don't know so much about me, but about regression. Regression stretches our comfort zone about what is real and what are we willing to, that capital K, knowing, know without proof. And I believe now that the frame that we see the world through is all in our mind, right? We're all, as you said, meaning making, and we're all interpreting everything all the time. And once I figured out for me that I could see the world, including all the hard stuff, through a frame that says the hard stuff is for suffering. The suffering is for growth, not for the sake of suffering. If I can take that frame, it makes me feel better about the world. I can believe that there's a point to it all, that there is a goal. I don't pretend to know what it is exactly, but that I have no proof, okay? But this perspective helps me feel better about myself and my life and my clients and my kids and my family, etc. And I could just as easily pick another view of the world, of which I would also have no proof, that would make me feel really fucking distraught and cynical about what the world is. And that has no more proof or validity than this other perspective that I have, what's the right word, embodied, that helps me see the world as meaningful and purposeful and keep going. And it's hard on purpose. Calculus is hard on purpose, but once you get calculus, you can do all this stuff. So if I have a choice in how to see the world and I don't have proof in any of the different possible choices, I might as well choose this one where there's meaning and there's purpose and there's growth for everybody, even the Donald Trump and the Adolf Hitler and I know I'm getting into like crazy territory, but like even the people we think of as the worst humans ever, the demons. It's this idea that we don't understand why people perpetrate, why bad things happen. But in my chosen knowing view that there is a reason, and I don't have to understand how it all works. And I know that we are all the same thing. We're all part of the same thing, and we're all growing, going through the same school, if you will. It's made my life much more loving and bearable, and I'm more grateful for it.
Thanks for being on the show, Barbara.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Deep thoughts with
Deep
Barbara
thoughts
and Noah.
Barbara.
Thanks, Noah.
In preparation for this interview with Barbara, I did my own past life regression with her. Here's an excerpt of my induction.
I'd like you now to picture in your mind's eye, using your imagination, a beautiful stairway with 5 steps leading down to the lower level garden, which is the sacred garden. Just picture the stairway, and however your mind pictures it is just perfect. Don't walk down the steps yet. In a moment, I'll count you down from 1 to 5, and with each step you take, your level of relaxation will double and double again and double again and double again and double again, compounding, leaving you profoundly relaxed as you enter the sacred garden below. Take the first step now, 1 foot and then the other. And as both feet come to rest, a wave of relaxation washes over you, leaving you twice as relaxed as only a moment ago. Good. Take the second step now, 1 foot, then the other, and then that wave of relaxation washes over you and through you, leaving you twice as relaxed as only a moment ago. Already much more relaxed than just a moment ago. Take the third step now, 1 foot, then the other, then that wave of relaxation washes over you, through you, around you, doubling again this beautiful, magical relaxation. At this point, you may begin to feel so light that you could float, but it's important to keep your feet on the steps. It will be important in a little while too. So take the fourth step, 1 foot, then the other, then that wave of relaxation washes through every cell of your body, leaving you twice as relaxed again. Good. And now take the fifth step, 1 foot, then the other, then that wave of relaxation,
washes through every cell of your body and through the space surrounding your body, every atom, every particle, and the space in between, and the relaxing energy, leaving you twice as relaxed again. And you can now step forward into the sacred garden, profoundly relaxed, and walk forward into the garden. Find a place to stand where you can look around. Notice what grows in this garden, the colors and textures. Notice the quality of the light in this sacred place. Notice how it feels to be this relaxed in your body, and how easy it is to realize your connection to every living thing in this place, to realize your connection even with the ground beneath your feet and with the sky above you. I'd like you now to picture in your mind's eye, using your imagination, a beautiful gateway somewhere in this garden. However your mind pictures the gateway is just perfect. Picture the gateway and walk over to it, but don't touch it yet. In a moment, I'm going to count backwards from 5 to 1 to help you through the gateway into the memory of another lifetime, to help you in your current life. All you have to do is listen to my voice and follow along. That's all you have to do. 5. Once more, connect through your heart to your soul, through your soul to your guides, asking for guidance and support as you access your own soul's memories to help you in your current life. Take all the time you need to make your request or intention, and when you're ready to move forward, let me know with a small nod. Okay. 4. Reach out and open the gateway. Just look through it, whether or not you see anything yet on the other side. 3. With one foot and then the other, step forward through the gateway. Feel your feet as you take each step, your foot landing on the other side, and then your second foot. Very simple, just stepping through and now standing on the other side of the gateway. Feel yourself standing on the ground, having stepped over the threshold, and now you're standing on the other side of the gateway. Good. I'd like you to look down. 2. And tell me if you can see your feet and the ground you stand on. Good. And 1. Let yourself be there and look around. When you're ready, speak and tell me the first thing you become aware of, no matter how small.
And here is an excerpt of one of my lifetimes.
Tell me about your feet. Is there anything on your feet? Any kind of shoes?
Big clunky shoes.
I see.
see. What color are the big clunky shoes?
Kind of brown, kind of black.
Uh-huh. What else do you seem to be wearing? You can use your hands to touch your clothing or look.
Black jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Big buttons.
What are the buttons made of? Can you tell?
Wood.
Feel them under your fingers. Try not to overthink anything. Do you have any pockets in your jacket?
2 in the front.
Would you like to check inside your pockets and see if there's anything there? What did you find? Anything?
Scissors.
I see. What else do you see around you?
Big pasture.
And do you seem to be alone or not alone?
I'm alone.
Check inside and tell me, how are you feeling emotionally? Any feelings you're aware of?
Expectant.
Good. Open to that feeling. Lean into that sense of expectancy. Let it help you access your knowing about what you're doing here. What are you expectant about? Check inside your own knowing and tell me what you become aware of. Just let it come.
They're coming.
Who's coming?
I'm not sure.
And how do you feel about knowing that they're coming?
Worried.
I see. Would it be okay to go to where you live?
It's a little far.
Well, then tell me what you're doing here. Are you on your way somewhere?
No, I'm just waiting.
Okay. What else do you notice? Anything at all?
Horses.
Good. Tell me more about the horses.
I have a few.
Are any of them saddled?
2.
Mm-hmm. Do you know where you'll be going after this?
They're coming for me.
And why do they want you? What do you have? Or what can you do? Or what have you done that makes them want to come for you?
I did something they think is bad, but I don't think is bad.
Okay. And are you waiting for them because you intend to go with them? Or are you going somewhere to get away from them? Check inside your own knowing. Just let it flow.
I want to fight them.
I see. What do they think you've done that's bad?
Help somebody.
And how did you help them?
I took them in.
That sounds very kind. And what had that person done?
Just being a person.
I see. Who are the people that are coming for you? What do they represent?
All I see is red.
I see. What else do you see?
Swastikas. I have a wife and children.
Can you see them? Are they with you?
I made them hide.
Would it be okay to go back in time a little so that you can see your wife and children? Just let yourself be there. Go back to an earlier time when you're with your wife and children. Just let yourself be there. And once you're there, tell me where you are and what's happening.
She's cooking dinner. Kids are at the table.
As you look at your wife, does she see you too?
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel when you see her?
We're very happy.
Good. Open to that sense of happiness. Let it in so that you can always remember it. Do you recognize her soul from anyone in your current life?
No.
Okay. And how about your children? Tell me how many children you have.
2, 1 boy, 1 girl.
And as you look at them, what do you become aware of? Anything?
Proud.
That must be a very good feeling. Let it in. Do you recognize either of their souls from anyone in your current life?
My brother.
Good. What else do you notice around you? This is your home, I assume.
It's small but quaint.
What do you see?
Wood floors. Pictures.
Check inside and tell me if you're aware of any emotions, any feelings at this time.
Gratitude.
Good. Let's go forward in time now to the next most significant event in that lifetime. Just let yourself be there. And once you're there, tell me where you are, what seems to be happening.
Still waiting.
Your family's in hiding.
Yes.
Why don't we go forward just enough to see what happens when they come?
They hurt me.
Do they take you with them?
No.
Do you survive?
No.
Okay. Are you still in the body?
Yeah.
Good. Let yourself go through the moment of death. Just notice what it's like when your soul leaves the body.
It's a slow death.
What are you aware of as you lay there dying slowly?
My stomach.
What about it?
It's bleeding.
What else do you notice?
They're leaving. They didn't find them.
How many of them were there?
My family and the people I took in. They're okay.
Good.
The next question. The next question. The next question. The next question.
Thank you for listening to Next Quest podcast. I learned something new today and I hope you did too. Stay tuned for our episode next week featuring Amanda Hilberg to discuss her practice and one of her areas of specialty, exposure and response prevention for obsessive compulsive disorder. Next Quest podcast is sponsored by Jan Dimmitt Resources. Save yourself the time and stress of credentialing and let the experts at Jan Dimmitt Resources do what they do best. For over 20 years, Jan Dimmitt Resources has provided administrative support and credentialing services to mental health professionals in Texas and beyond. Visit their website at jandimmitt.com. That is JANDIMMITT.com, or call 512-731-5725 for more information on all the ways they can make running your practice easier for you. Next Quest podcasts rely solely on donations to keep this project going. Please consider becoming a patron on my Patreon page at www.patreon, that's patreon.com/nextquestpodcast, or you can make a one-time donation on my website at www.nextquestcounseling.com/aboutnextquestpodcast. You can also support the podcast by liking our Facebook page. Until next question, this is Noah Garcia signing off.